Divergent ruined everything. Let me explain. Hi guys. Welcome back, and okay, maybe I started off a little bit strong with that one, but I do want to talk about this today, but perhaps I should phrase it a little bit differently. Divergent may not have ruined everything, but I wager that it did play a major role in the decline of YA dystopian literature. Now, before you start yelling at me in the comments, please don't yell at me. Let me clarify, I don't think Divergent destroyed the entire genre on its own. Absolutely not. But I do think it signaled the beginning of the end of the YA dystopian boom. The period where series like The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and yes, Divergent itself ruled the literary and cinematic landscape. Yet by the mid-2010s, the dystopian trend was running its course. Blockbuster adaptations dried up, the last installment of Divergent got cancelled, and the genre started losing its grip on mainstream culture. So how did this happen? To understand how Divergent contributed to this decline, I think we need a baseline for comparison, for which I will be using The Hunger Games. In my opinion, it's not only one of, if not the best YA dystopian series, but one of the best series of all time. Both thematically rich and meticulously crafted. It's a book that I honestly believe should be taught in school curricula and should be studied. For its analysis, The Hunger Games serves as the gold standard because it set the bar, and in many ways I think that Divergent tried to replicate that formula, though with less success. Also, it's my channel, so I can pick whatever I want to compare and contrast because it makes sense in my brain. And hopefully through this video it will make sense to yours too, but if it doesn't, that's okay. I will just scream into the light instead. Now I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that Veronica Roth copied The Hunger Games or the storyline or any part of it, really. Her story is original and she deserves the credit for that work because it was a big success. Like, she deserves all of the credit for that. But it's apparent that Divergent attempted to tap into the same market, messaging, and emotional impact that The Hunger Games achieved. The key difference lies in its execution. And that's where things began to unravel for the genre. And yes, before you ask, I did enjoy Divergent, or at least the first two books. We don't talk about the third book, okay? We don't talk about it. I very much enjoyed the first two books, and I still rewatch the first movie from time to time, so this critique doesn't come from a place of anger or malice or like pure negativity. I was a fan, I am a fan, and I vividly remember waiting for the sequel. Like, I'd read the first book when it came out, and then before the sequel came out, the movie came out, I believe. At least that's how it works in my memory. I was in the back of the classroom, I was reading it, and then the movie came out, and all of my friends and classmates started being like so excited, but they were also all like, oh no, I can't believe we have to wait like 2 weeks, a month, whatever it was, before the sequel comes out. And I remember, like, you don't know pain. Like, I've been waiting for a year for the sequel. Like, I've been waiting for a year. And you should be like a month? Oh, poor you. Poor you. I just think we can appreciate the work and still recognize the flaws. And in fact, I think it's deeply important to recognize flaws in the things that we love, especially when those flaws may have contributed to the entire genre's decline. For those of you unfamiliar with Divergent, and if you missed this era completely, consider yourself lucky or perhaps deprived, depending on your perspective. Here's a brief recap for you. So we start with Tris Pryor. She's our protagonist, and she lives in a post-apocalyptic society divided into 5 houses. Districts. Factions. And these factions are based on dominant personality traits. You've got abnegation, they are selfless, they are very demure, very mindful, and they don't do too much, like looking in the mirror for longer than 5 minutes a day. We've got Dauntless, who are the cool kids. They are the brave kids. We've got Candor, they're the honest ones. We've got Amity, they're the kind ones. And we've got Erudite. Erudite? I can't remember actually. Erudite.
You're supposed to be smart.
Either way, they're the smart ones. I clearly don't belong there. But let me know where you belonged in the comments. So in the society where when you turn 16, you have to do this test, which is supposed to tell you like which faction you align with and help you in the choosing ceremony before you like make the choice of which faction you are going to be a part of for the rest of your life. At 16. Tris at this test discovers that she doesn't fit into just one. She's expecting to just hear that she's abnegation, where she's from, and just like go back into that. Instead, she is told that she's Divergent, which makes her dangerous to the rigid system that she's living in. So it's all very hush-hush, very like secret, whatever.
Your results were inconclusive.
That's impossible. It doesn't make any sense.
Not impossible. It's just extremely rare. They call it Divergent.
Triss learns that she actually fits into 3 of the factions. She fits into Abnegation, which is the one where she's from. It's where she was born and raised. She fits in Erudite, and she fits in Dauntless. So of course she chooses Dauntless, because duh. At Dauntless, she meets her love interest Floor, and she uncovers a conspiracy led by a corrupt government. What follows is a series of increasingly convoluted battles against authority, which ultimately, spoiler alert, leads to Triss's death in the 3rd and final book, which we don't talk about because it was... Look, the 3rd book was bad. I'll say the 3rd book was bad. Anyway, at its core, Divergent hits many of the familiar beats of dystopian genre. However, this is kind of where the problem begins. Divergent relies heavily on tropes without grounding them in a meaningful story. The faction system, while intriguing on the surface, doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. It's a simplistic way of categorizing people, which undermines the complexity which we've kind of come to expect from dystopian narratives, especially after the Hunger Games, but even with like the Maze Runner or just other things that were big at that time, we've just kind of come to expect complexity. And yes, we're meant to see Triss as a character who doesn't fit into the category, but that just kind of makes her a blank slate. And to be fair, ooh, it just started raining, if you can hear that. I'm raining real hard. And to be fair, she's meant to be a blank slate, right? YA is directed at 12 to 18-year-olds, and in this age group, you are generally really trying to figure out who you are as a person and where you belong. This is why the faction system is really attractive, but in order to appeal to as many different 12 to 18-year-olds, and beyond, because older people can also read YA, but to do that and to be as big of a market success as possible, Divergent needed Triss to be as relatable as possible to as many people as possible, from 12 to 18, wildly different stages of life. But for everyone to be able to project themselves onto her was kind of the goal, right? And the only way to do this is to make her a blank slate, so they did great there. But that means that there are no interesting personality traits or quirks to take people out of this projection, to clash with their own personalities and be like, that's not me, so I can't project onto her. This is why Triss isn't selfish or angry or really happy or determined or stubborn or anything. Her lack of distinct traits leaves her feeling underdeveloped, and it makes her boring and plain, and makes it really clear that she was designed for reader projection more than to stand on her own as a compelling character or figure. Then there's the case of Triss being a chosen one, just to add that really popular trope in there. Triss is built to not be interesting personality-wise, for the aforementioned projectability, yet by the very nature of her being Divergent, she is made out to be special, even though this is contradicted in later books.
You're wrong.
But there's nothing to support her specialness other than that she's Divergent. When she joins Dauntless, she becomes remarkably skilled at fighting, despite presumably never having worked out a day in her life. If they don't let you look in mirrors in Abnegation, I'm gonna guess they're not on like a workout regime. But there's nothing to substantiate her skill. She's special, but for no good reason other than being Divergent. Being Divergent doesn't give you magic powers, it doesn't make you strong or fast or skilled at anything. It just means you have more than one dominant personality trait. So her being so good at essentially everything really fast just feels flat. It isn't satisfying to watch her growth because she never really had to fight or struggle to grow. There's no substance. And let's talk about the love interest 4.
My name's 4.
4 like the number?
Exactly like the number.
What happened? 1 through 3 were taken?
Now I will say I'm in love with him. This is where I fell in love with Theo James. So, love of my life. But even that won't shield you from criticism. Sorry. He checks all of the boxes. He's tall, handsome, aloof, mysterious. He's a white boy with brown hair.
What makes you think you can talk to me?
But beyond these service traits, he lacks depth. I do think he's one of the most well-developed characters in Divergent. With his past with his dad, his fears, the reason why he's named 4. I think he's one of the most well-developed characters in that series, but even that still feels surface level, right? It doesn't feel deep to me. The villains suffer from the same problem. They're evil, they're Like, are they even that evil? But they're evil for the most generic reasons.
It's hard to let go. Faction before blood. It's an important ideal, but sometimes difficult to fulfill. It goes against our fundamental human nature. But that's exactly the weakness we need to overcome.
You think that human nature is a weakness?
I think human nature is the enemy.
But it's surface, and it's something we've heard a million times. It doesn't introduce nuance or depth. The villain also isn't interesting. In contrast, The Hunger Games offered something far more substantial. Suzanne Collins didn't just create a dystopian world for the sake of cool aesthetics or action-packed sequences. The series is rooted in real-world issues. It's rooted in war, in poverty, in media corruption, or media exploitation, government corruption, and so much more. Collins has said that she got inspired to write The Hunger Games because of the stark juxtaposition that she was seeing on TV between some reality TV singing show and the invasion of Iraq, which gives The Hunger Games a sense of urgency and realism, which unfortunately only becomes more and more prevalent and relevant every day. The Capitol's oppressive regime wasn't just evil for the sake of being evil. It was a reflection of real-world power struggles. And there was nuance and depth to their evilness.
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine, as long as it's contained.
So,
contain it.
Katniss, unlike Triss, wasn't a chosen one who was special because she defied a simplistic categorization system, right? She was an extremely reluctant participant in a brutal system, driven almost solely by her desire to protect her little sister. Katniss was deeply flawed. She was angry, she was traumatized, she was stubborn, she was mean, and at times she was really unlikable.
you have to make people like you. And right now, sweetheart, you're not off to a real good start.
And that in itself made her relatable, but it made her a deep, fleshed out, real feeling character. Characters can be relatable without being blank slates for projection. We can relate to parts of characters, and that can be enough. We want to see ourselves reflected in our favorite characters, not onto them. Katniss was a survivor. She wasn't a hero by design, which gave her character arc weight, which made the rebellion feel like an authentic movement rather than a plot convenience. Additionally, I think a really important differentiator between the emotional impact that Hunger Games made in having Katniss fail, because ultimately she fails. Prim ultimately dies. So everything that Katniss started all of this for, unintentionally, she never meant to start any of this, all she ever wanted was to save her sister, and she didn't. And then she didn't even overthrow the government. Her plan failed, and the rebellion took care of the actual overthrowing of the government, right? So Katniss failed in essentially every sense, and that was part of what made it so poignant of a message and so nuanced and deep of a novel series with so much meaning behind it. And I think Divergent tried to replicate this by having Triss die. But it didn't work. At least it didn't work on me. Triss died and I felt nothing. I did not care. Because I didn't care about Triss. Because she wasn't interesting. She was more of a plot device than she was a character. But Triss dying doesn't have the same impact because we don't know what she was fighting for other than fighting the evil government because it's evil. That's kind of what Divergent was. We're fighting the evil government because the government is evil, and you fight the evil government. That's what you do. That's the trope. Katniss wasn't fighting because the government was evil. Katniss wasn't even fighting the government. Katniss didn't want to fight the government. In essence, Divergent adopted the external trappings of dystopian fiction without its core substance. It took the most marketable elements of the genre, the brave protagonist, the oppressive government, the mysterious love interest, and even in a weird form, a love triangle, I guess, where 4 moves on with Trish's best friend after she dies, who he didn't even like, and we won't get started. We won't get started on that. But it took those elements and stitched it together in a way that lacked the thematic complexity of The Hunger Games or something like 1984. The result is a story that felt hollow. It wasn't saying anything new or particularly meaningful. It was merely capitalizing on a trend. And this lack of depth, and ultimately, I guess, the misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what made The Hunger Games successful, ultimately is what contributed to the genre's decline. As Divergent rose in popularity, because it did, it was incredibly popular and successful, publishers and filmmakers scrambled to replicate its success, because all we care about is money. So it started churning out increasingly derivative works, but as these stories piled up, without the substance, audiences grew tired of the formulaic plots, the uninspired characters, and dystopian settings that failed to deliver on any real-world commentary, any reflection of the real world, any nuance. The genre became oversaturated and lost appeal, especially as newer, fresher trends in fantasy and contemporary fiction took over. So no, Divergent didn't single-handedly ruin YA dystopian literature, but it marked a turning point. It demonstrated how the genre could be boiled down to its barest bones, its most marketable tropes, at the expense of meaningful storytelling. Divergent didn't fail because it was poorly written. It wasn't. It succeeded commercially, but it did signal the beginning of the end of the dystopian boom by prioritizing marketability over narrative depth. It was made to be marketable, not to be meaningful. And ultimately, that is how Divergent contributed to the decline of the genre. Thank you for watching and listening to me rant about this, if you're still here. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you agree, if you disagree, either's fine. This is just kind of my opinion and based on like the research that I've done. And shout out to Jules. She is the one that first introduced me to this idea, I guess. But yeah, I'm always open to hear other opinions and other perspectives, as long as we keep it respectful and nice, please. Anyway, like and subscribe if it's something you enjoyed, and if you want to see more content like this, I've got some other deep dives and analysis planned. Yeah. Alright, thank you again. If you're all the way here, follow me on Instagram or TikTok if you want, and it means a lot. Yeah. I'll see you soon. Bye.